lesson we are going to cover the let and the const keywords that we have been mentioning so far, but we didn't say what are those keywords useful for. So let's do that right now before going any further. So plain JavaScript just has a var keyword that allows you to define a variable. And what could go wrong with declaring a variable, right? That's one of the base functionalities of any language. Well, the var keyword in ECMAScript 5, so plain JavaScript, it has a problem compared to equivalent features of other languages. Let's have a look at it. Let's write a slightly more complex program where we are going to test for the value of message. So we are entering here a block. So in this block here, we want to define another variable, which let's say we are going to call it e. And we're going to define it as a number using a type annotation. Now I will just paste in here some very simple code that it's just a for loop. It's going to loop through the e variable and it's going to print it 3 times to the console. So let's try this out. Notice that you don't need to run again the TypeScript compiler from the command line. Your IDE is actually continuously compiling the program. So any changes that you made to the program, you simply hit Ctrl S to make sure that it's saved, and that will trigger a new hello-world file with your latest changes. So you can simply refresh the browser and you can see here that we have printed to the console the value of the e variable 012, which is what we would expect. But now take a look, this variable here, e number that we have defined inside this scope, this block, this is actually still visible outside the block scope, which is rather surprising for developers coming from other languages other than JavaScript. Let's print it out to see what's going on. If we simply print e to the screen after this loop, we would expect maybe that this would be undefined because this is a block scoped variable, but take a look. The value of e is still present there, okay? So this means that e, the e variable, is visible outside the scope of this block. This is because in plain JavaScript, using the var keyword is not block scoped. So if you define several blocks, several if blocks that are nested inside each other, and you would like to have a local variable that is only visible inside the block scope, that is not possible with the var keyword. And that is exactly the problem that the let keyword solves. So if now instead of declaring e as a var, we declare it using the let keyword, take a look at what happens. So this is still a variable, but you now get an error here, cannot find name e. So e is now a block scoped variable, so it's not visible outside this block, the if block. It's not visible in this statement here, the console.log. So block scoped variables are possible using the let keyword. This might lead to the question, should we still use the var keyword while doing TypeScript programs? I don't think so. I think that if you have a variable, you should always make it a block scoped variable and use the let keyword. Var is just there for backwards compatibility with plain JavaScript. Does this mean that we should declare all our variables using let? Well, actually, I'm going to suggest to you to prefer another keyword by default instead of let. So one of the best practices of developing programs that are easier to read and to maintain is to avoid mutable states. So if we declare here this variable as a const, we have effectively declared it as a constant. So this means that this variable is only populated at initialization time, and then later in the program, if we try to reassign it to another string, so the empty string would be a valid value for a string, but we have here left hand side of assignment cannot be a constant. So const is really a simple way of declaring a block scoped immutable variable. So let's summarize the 3 keywords var, let and const. So var does not have block scope. It should not be used while building new TypeScript programs. You should either choose let or const instead. And which of the two to choose? We should use const if we want to declare the variable as being immutable, and this is generally a good idea to set a variable its value and initialize it only once, and try to build our program without relying on variable mutation. This is generally a good approach that leads us to less bugs. But if we need mutable variables, block scoped mutable variables, we can do that using the let keyword. One important thing to bear in mind about const is that when we apply it to a variable that it's an object, only the object reference is immutable. Try to assign message to null, we get back an error saying that we cannot do a second assignment to a constant after it has been initialized. But let's say that, for example, we want to change the property hello. Let's try that. As you can see, the program compiles, so declaring message as const does not mean that the whole object is immutable. It's only the reference to the object which is immutable. So to further illustrate this, let's say that we declare here a second reference to the same object and we make it not a constant but a variable. So we use let and we are going to point it to message. Now this second reference to the same object can be mutated because it's declared with let. So if we say message2 equals null, as you can see, the program compiles successfully. So it's important to understand that const is not about deep immutability of an object. It's really about creating an immutable reference, an immutable variable. So I hope that this explains the difference between the three keywords and when to use each. If you would like some of the code of this lesson, you have here the git tag section -1-2 where you can go directly to this version of the Hello World program. So now let's continue exploring more features of TypeScript, more features of the ECMAScript 6 standard that we can already use today.